So my name is Sara Donaldson. I am doing a combined program, a Masters of Clinical Neuropsychology and Doctor of Philosophy, or PhD, and my research field is in obstructive sleep apnea and cognition. So for me, it wasn't as clear-cut as a lot of other people. I kind of got to the end of high school, psychology wasn't offered there as a subject, but I knew that I loved people and I loved understanding how people worked. And so when I was looking at all the course options at university, I was like, well, psychology seems to fit that. And it's worked out so far so good. In my undergraduate, I took psychology with a second major in German. And by the time I got to third year, I loved psychology so much that I didn't want to miss out on any of the units, and so I switched to a double psych major. So for me, it was initially, if I'm being honest, because I wanted to be a clinician. So at the time in WA, neuropsychology was only offered at the University of Western Australia, and it was only offered as a combined Masters and PhD program. So that was my first kind of gut thing that pulled me towards it. But through my honours year, I developed a really keen interest in research, and so for me, I saw the value in being a clinician that can balance both the research and the clinical skills. And so there's this thing called the scientist practitioner model, which essentially is that clinicians should be able to integrate those two worlds to keep refining their practice. And so for me, doing the PhD was a big part of that. So I think I developed, I guess, an enthusiasm for the PhD after the Masters, but it came together well, I think. Yes, so for me, it actually kind of goes back to honours. So I kind of missed the allocations a little bit. Like, I didn't really know where I wanted to fit with my research. I knew I liked research from doing a small project in undergrad, but I didn't know what area I was interested in. And so I kind of fell into an honours project looking at older adults and sleep. And so by the time I finished that year, I actually figured out, oh, actually I do really like this area. And so at the end of that year, I reached out to my supervisors again from honours and was like, please take me as a PhD. I don't have any other options yet, and I really enjoy this kind of research. And that's how it kind of happened for me. So the biggest challenge I faced during my PhD is when things go wrong repeatedly, and just making sure I'm coming back the next day with fresh energy and persisting through that. Because that's a natural part of a PhD, that things will go wrong, but it can be discouraging at times. So I think that's been a challenge. And then the second challenge for me is being in the combined program, balancing the workload between managing classes and being on pracs and things like that, but also keeping up with the research side of things, and also maintaining a balance to actually see friends and family and maintain that social part of life can be really tricky to manage and balance. For me, the things that I've learned have definitely been around research, so learning how to write things up, how to do statistics, how to communicate findings to people in a way that's digestible and understandable. For me, more personally, it's been about persistence, so learning how to push through with challenges and keep showing up and keep doing what I'm doing, and also patience. So I'm someone who wants things done right now, and I'm not very patient, and so that's been actually quite a big challenge for me, to just be able to sit and wait for a draft to come back. But yeah, that's probably the things that I've learnt the most. I guess without being able to predict the future, I probably would have not done it during COVID, because I think having done a PhD through COVID, we did miss out on going to things like conferences, both international and interstate, and that's normally like a huge part of a PhD experience. So I think future students can still look forward to that, which is good. I think also getting involved in things earlier in my PhD. I think I waited until my third year before I really started like going to workshops and meeting with people outside of classes. So I think getting involved earlier is important. And I think also asking questions in the first year of supervisors, like why are we choosing this measure over something else? And not challenging, but just asking more questions and getting some clarity, because I think now looking back, I do have to now justify those decisions I made early on. And sometimes I sort of have to think, why did we do that? Like, can you remind me, supervisor? So that's, yeah, something I have to think about. I think strategies are something that have developed over the course of the PhD. Number one, I think, is not letting the PhD be everything in your life. I think when you do that, it really becomes a bit full on. So what I mean by that is to have balance. So for me, it was staying physically active, making time with friends, trying as best as I could not to take the PhD home with me. So working sort of a 9 to 5 on the PhD and then coming home and keeping it at uni. Also, I think on days where it was feeling particularly stressful, instead of having kind of the milestones of, you know, this draft needs to be done by this date, breaking it into smaller pieces and going, actually, like, I only need to satisfy this at the end of this day and that'll be enough. And more recently, it's been about thinking about what can I actually control here? What are things that I can do and what are things that I just can't change at all? And that, I think, takes a bit of pressure off as well. Also, having friends that are both in the course with you and outside of the course, because I think friends in the course really understand what you're going through that maybe friends outside of the course can't grasp as much because they're doing something very different. But then you also need the friends outside of uni, because you need people to remind you that there's something outside of your office. So I think having both is really important. So for me, I'm maybe 2 months out from submitting, so I'm really like over the final hill and I'm seeing the finish line. It really hasn't been until recently that I've seen that finish line, and I think for me a big part has been creating the whole thesis document. And when it's all in one, like, you can't help but get a little bit excited and see, like, oh my gosh, like, I'm almost there. I've been given the advice by other people that I should book a week off after submitting and just go away and spend time away from uni, and so I'm looking forward to doing that. My friend recently submitted and she did her walk, and I think that's like a really big part of submitting, which is when you go to the graduate research office and you don't have to submit physically anymore, but you go there and you get a mug, a PhD mug, and everyone that's been on the journey with you walks with you and does that. And I think that's a really significant way to kind of mark the end of the journey. So I look forward to that. Lots of advice, but I guess like two main things is, number one, I think make sure it's the right time in your life to be doing a PhD. It's a lot to take on. It's really rewarding but really challenging at the same time. So you want to make sure you're at the right space to be taking that on, to really make the most of it. And then my other big piece of advice would be take every opportunity, even if it doesn't feel directly relevant to moving your own research forward. I think university, there's just so many things that you can do to strengthen your skill set and also build your network. So yeah, take every opportunity for sure. Yes, I would definitely do it again. While it's been definitely the hardest thing I've ever done, it's also been the most rewarding. When I look back to who I was, you know, about 4 or 5 years ago when I started the PhD, I feel very young, and I might still look that way, but I've definitely been tossed and turned by the PhD, and I've grown so much as a result. So I definitely would do it again for sure. So for me, I'm not totally sure where I want to end up yet, but I do know I want to be in half clinical, half research. That would be my ideal. I'm finding myself kind of the first point where there's not a logical next step, and that's exciting and pretty intimidating, I guess. But I know that the qualifications that will have when I get the PhD is the doors are just open, and there's lots of things that I'll be able to do. Though I do have a bit of a soft spot for older adults, so maybe I'll end up with that.